What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I want to talk a little Canelo Alvarez before we get into this, Canelo Alvarez versus Dmitry Bivol, or should I say Dmitry Bivol versus Canelo Alvarez, since Dmitry Bivol is defending his WBA light heavyweight belt. I want to talk a little Canelo Alvarez, but in the context that I really feel like a lot of us are taking what he's been doing for granted. Now, I've seen this like time and time again. It happened in the Floyd Mayweather career, happened in the Manny Pacquiao career, happened in the Oscar De La Hoya career, happened in a lot of careers where somebody is just doing something exceptional. And all that some people want to say is, oh, they're not fighting this guy, they're ducking this person, oh, they're not, fighting the best out there, they can't be the GOAT, blah, 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 There is something to be said about having a level of consistency every time you step in the ring, whether you think that the fighter ended up winning or losing the fight. Like, for instance, I thought that Triple G won in the first fight against Canelo. I thought the second one could have gone either way. I feel like an argument could be made for the Erislandy Lara and Canelo fight. And then I felt like other fighters did well until they weren't doing well, like Billy Joe Saunders and Sergey Kovalev. But there is something to be said about performing at an elite level every time you enter the ring. And that's one of the things that made, for instance, Floyd Mayweather Jr. so special. It's like whether you are on that night and you are at your best on that given night, because there's a lot of variability. I mean, you ever notice that sometimes when you see like a favored fighter enter the ring, like Josh Taylor against Catterall, you don't have to even think that far back, right? Like you had Taylor Catterall, you had Teofimo Lopez, George Kambosos, you had Mikey Garcia, Sandor Martin, and for whatever reason, the A-side fighter is just flat. They just can't seem to really pull the trigger. They can't deliver the way that they seem to be able to deliver before, and they just don't seem like themselves. Well, what we just saw Canelo do at 168, regardless of what you thought of how good Callum Smith, Billy Joe Saunders, and Caleb Plant, not to mention Avni Yildirim, but he wasn't one of the belt holders we're talking. Regardless of how you thought those 168-pound champs were, it was up to Canelo to enter the ring and to prove superiority over them on that night. We don't know how Canelo was feeling going into the ring. We don't know what kind of pressures or how he internalizes or manages stress, all of these different things. We see people collapse all the time and fall short of expectations all the time. And you can't tell me that, if somebody's coming into the ring at like 80%, that Callum Smith can't do something about that and take advantage and perhaps beat them, or Billy Joe Saunders, if you're not ready to fight that night, that Billy Joe Saunders can't pull off an upset, or Caleb Plant, same thing. I mean, these guys were all undefeated before they entered the ring with Canelo. And that's another thing that should be noted. The amount of O's in the loss column that Canelo has taken out. Each one of those belt holders were undefeated when they fought Canelo Alvarez. So regardless of what you think of him not yet fighting David Benavidez, which I truly, and I keep on saying this, if David Benavidez hadn't stupidly lost his title twice outside of the ring, once due to, drug abuse or recreational drug use, and the other for not making weight before fighting Romer Angulo, you don't think that Canelo Alvarez would have fought David Benavidez, as Canelo was, evidently eyeballing at 168, saying, I want to collect all the belts there? Like, you think that Canelo would have fought like Callum Smith for the WBA? Because the WBC belt was on the line in that fight too, because it was vacated, taken away from David Benavidez. Gilberto Ramirez was the WBO champ, I believe, before Billy Joe Saunders was. So if this was like a year or two prior and Canelo was in the same part of his career, do you think that he wouldn't have fought Gilberto Ramirez and David Benavidez? I just don't have the evidence other than Canelo saying he doesn't want to fight fellow countrymen anymore. But aside from that, just from a competitive standpoint, I have no reason to believe that Canelo Alvarez would not fight them. And I mean, he's fighting Dmitry freaking Bivol next. Like, I don't think you guys are really giving enough respect to how dangerous a fight and how much of a question mark there is on whether Canelo Alvarez is going to come out of this with the belt and then just cruising into that, September showdown against Triple G for their trilogy fight. I think that you guys are taking for granted, like it's a foregone conclusion, that Canelo is going to go in there and handle Dmitry Bivol like he handled Callum Smith, like he handled Sergey Kovalev, like he handled, Daniel Jacobs, or whoever he's fought over the past, I mean, everybody that I've named so far, he's basically fought over the past like 4 or 5 years. And yes, when he was at 154, I would have loved to have seen him fight a Jarrett Hurd, a Charlo, either one of the Charlos when they were both at 154. So yeah, I get it if you don't like that he hasn't fought David Benavidez yet, that he hasn't fought Jermall Charlo yet. But has anybody really just done enough in their own lane to demand, like, to basically say, I am entitled to this Canelo Alvarez sweepstakes? I mean, I know Jermall Charlo is still undefeated, and he's been a multi-divisional champ now, and he has beaten some pretty good fighters, but I just do not think that his campaigning at 160 has been stellar enough to say, to really put a stamp on it and say, yes, Canelo needs to fight me because I've done this and this and this. What? He just isn't there in his 160-pound accomplishments yet. So, yeah, I don't think that Canelo Alvarez lacks a spine when it comes to fighting the baddest out there. Again, he's about to get in there with the WBA light heavyweight champ. Canelo Alvarez is about 5'8". And yes, of course, he's thick and muscular and fast as hell with the hands and with the upper body and head movement. Like, I was kind of sleeping on that in the early part of Canelo's career. I didn't know that he was going to develop that slick style game where he's become one of the slickest upper body operators in the game. I'm not saying that he's Pernell Whitaker, but he's nearly about as good as it gets when it comes to being able to stand right in front of somebody and kind of slipping shots and making them miss. He's become expert at that. So yeah, would I favor him over Dmitry Bivol? I think so, and I can't wait to do the preview on the fight. That one's going to be coming soon, but it's not a foregone conclusion that Canelo's beating Dmitry Bivol. I think that we're taking for granted the fact that this guy is stepping into the ring, and every time he steps into the ring, he's operating at a super elite level, vanquishing Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, and say what you want. He fought 24 rounds with Triple G without hitting the canvas once. Think about that. He fought the monster at 160, the guy who we saw knocking off, all of the contenders that weren't named, Kid Chocolate, Peter Quillen, or Dmitry Pirov, and a couple of others. But, Triple G was just knocking at all of his opponents. He went on that tremendous knockout run up until his decision win against Daniel Jacobs. But yeah, Canelo fought 24 rounds with Triple G. Let's give him respect for that alone. That is pretty nuts, right? I mean, we just saw what 40-year-old Triple G did to a current, belt holder at 160 in Ryota Murata. I mean, even when Canelo Alvarez fought Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. at the time, I looked at that fight as being pretty risky business. Yes, it was at a catch weight. Yes, Chavez Jr. blew even that catch weight. And yes, Chavez Jr. has proven to be one of the most unprofessional professionals that I've ever seen in boxing. It was still a risky fight when I heard that fight was being made. So yeah, Canelo Alvarez has taken risks. Yes, some of those fights are kind of like you would have wished he would have chosen to fight somebody else, like when he fought Liam Smith, when he made Amir Khan, go up a couple, divisions to fight him, when he fought an aging Miguel Cotto, which that was a good, competitive, close fight with a very good Hall of Fame fighter. So yeah, even Canelo Alvarez is, outside of his top 5, like, toughest matchups on paper going into the fight. Even the fights outside of that were still good fights by other fighters' standards. Like if Jermall Charlo or if Benavidez fought like Billy Joe Saunders or, Caleb Plant. And I know Benavidez wants to fight Caleb Plant. I get that. But the fight-by-fight schedule shouldn't be slept on. Compare it to Floyd Mayweather's, compare it to Manny Pacquiao's, compare it to many of the greats of the past. Look at when all the guys that I just mentioned, look at when they fought, who they fought. Because one of the issues that people take is, oh yeah, he fought this guy, but he fought them like after this happened to them, or after they got a loss or two on their record, or when they were like post-prime. People kind of nitpick the schedules, but I'm telling you, if you really pay attention, Canelo Alvarez, 57-1 with 2 draws, his fight-by-fight schedule is as elite as just about anybody. Like, the only people who fight a scarier fight-by-fight schedule might be the type of journeymen who are just kind of trotted out there to be cannon fodder against the A-side fighter. Like the guys, we just saw Thomas Delorme, fight like prime Stanionis and like prime Boots Ennis. Like these guys who are just coming up, and it's like, okay, let's see if you can knock out this gatekeeper. Like those gatekeepers sometimes just have a ridiculous schedule. So I get that. But among elite fighters, Hall of Fame level fighters, Go ahead and match Canelo Alvarez's fight-by-fight schedule. I promise, it passes the test. He's on par with those other legends. So, yeah, let me know what you think about Canelo Alvarez's, consistency in going to the ring. And again, whether he's feeling 90%, 80%, whether he's battling like a nagging injury or something. How he performs. Remember when he was wearing like a knee brace a lot of the times for a lot of the fights? Still does in some of his fights. You never know how this guy is feeling, but you know how he's operating. And you know his track record. You know what he's doing once he takes to the ring. And I don't think that should be discounted or unappreciated. Because yeah, at a certain point, Canelo Alvarez is either going to lose or retire. None of these things last forever. If you give anybody enough time, they're going to eventually die. That's just how things work. So, yeah, don't take for granted just greatness when it's sustained greatness. And then when the person finally loses, and be like, oh, yeah, they weren't nothing to begin with. Don't do that. You're just playing yourself, and you're robbing yourself out of being able to just witness and appreciate greatness when we have it in front of us. Again, I saw it happen to Floyd Mayweather. I saw it happen with Manny Pacquiao's career, Miguel Cotto's career, De La Hoya's career, some of the great heavyweights' careers. Yeah, don't do that with Canelo. Appreciate it. Yeah, let me know what you think. And what do you think his chances are against Dmitry Bivol? Or better yet, what do you think Dmitry Bivol's chances are against Canelo Alvarez? I do think this is a very dangerous fight. I do think that Dmitry Bivol is going to be closer to the guy who was fighting Joe Smith Jr., Sullivan Barrera, some of his better fights, Jean Pascal, when Dmitry Bivol was just looking great, and not the Dmitry Bivol who fought Craig Richards, who I think is better than advertised. And then in this last fight, Dmitry Bivol didn't look so hot. I don't think that's the Dmitry Bivol we're going to see operating against Canelo Alvarez. And if Dmitry Bivol, who's not even an old fighter, can rewind the clock just a few fights ago and be that guy against Canelo Alvarez, I'm not saying that this one is a pick'em. I'm saying Canelo's going to have a very tough task ahead of him. But yeah, let me know what you think. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.